Hello and welcome all to our live webinar. Today we're hosting a special guest from SAP, Rocco Giuliano, an internal communications expert who'll talk about effectively managing internal communications tech stack, doing more with less. After our Q&A session, Rocco will be answering questions from you, so feel free to use the Q&A on the bottom of the webinar screen to pose questions. In case you have to leave early, a recording of this webinar will be available on our website, cmoscloud.com. We're living in a time of great big changes, and this also affects internal communications. In the past couple of years, the role of internal communications has been on the rise as more and more companies started picking up on the importance of keeping their workforce aligned and connected. Companies learned that there are no leaders without those who follow respectfully, and that for successful leadership, effective communication is essential. The pandemic sped up the pace of innovation and adoption of new working modes, but work as we know it has been evolving for quite some time. Many companies today comprise a globalized workforce, the workforce that relies and thrives on efficient communication systems. The communication systems, due to various reasons, at times get clustered, siloed, and messy. Today, we'll learn how to surpass these obstacles and build an effective internal communication strategy that can future-proof an organization from whatever challenges come its way. In this webinar, we are joined by SAP's Rocco Giuliano, an HR communications expert who's been with SAP for over 18 years and who can tell us firsthand information about how he has been effectively managing internal communications of a big company such as SAP. Rocco Giuliano has a thick HR background with experience in roles such as HR service consultant, internal consulting role, owning employee-facing communications and SAP's automated contract generation processes. Having driven process on automation standardization and currently working on blueprinting and driving the HR comms hub for SAP, he is the right person to talk about the immense importance of internal communications in a company. Hello, Rocco. Thank you for joining us today to share your knowledge on this important topic.
Hi, Raviola, and hello, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to this webinar.
We're very glad to have you here today, so you're very welcome. We'll start with a first simple question. How do you define internal communications? What is internal communications, and how would you explain it so that a 5-year-old could understand it?
Yeah, interesting question. And by chance, I have a 5-year-old. So one of my sons is 5-year-old, and yeah, he's in the kindergarten. And in the kindergarten, they are getting every noon they are getting a lunch. And sometimes they are lucky and it's sausage, and sometimes they have bad luck and it's vegetable. But the lady who's providing the lunch and who is preparing the lunch, she does it with love. And she always announces it's lunchtime with love. And she knows that, okay, maybe there's a boy who doesn't like the vegetables. Then she arranged the vegetables in a kind of smiley on the plate or whatever. So she really provides the message with love. She handles or she deals with the needs of her audience, which are the kids in the kindergarten. And sometimes she has to provide bad news with a smile in the smiley vegetables. So that's a good example of real life internal communications.
Indeed. So thank you for that. So regardless of the news, whether it's bad, whether it's good, it needs to be delivered. That's what the point of internal communications is. We don't want any 5-year-olds missing out on lunch. Okay, now let's clear up some terms. How do you see HR communications and internal communications? These two terms are often used interchangeably. If you see them differently, what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, indeed. So internal communications is more or less everything what you're providing to inform your audience, your employees about the news regarding your regarding your company, what is going on in your company. There can be whatever information about the facilities, information about information about the cars, information about whatever. HR comms is a little different because HR comms often provides information regarding the careers of the employees, regarding the salaries, regarding bonuses, and so on and so forth. So HR comms needs to be a little more serious from time to time because it's often related to money, and people are reading the money-related topics much more closely and with much more detail than the other topics. But in fact, everything is internal communications, and I don't want to say that an internal communication about a building does not need to be that professional than an internal communication with regards to salary or something like that. But there's a slight more detailed focus on the HR communications.
Okay.
On the employee side.
Okay, all right. And also, as far as I understand, the tone is different. When we're talking about money-related matters, we tend to get a little bit more serious.
We tend to, but we can also provide those information in a nice voice of tone. So not everything has to be that strict only because it's money related. It needs to be understandable, of course, but we can also always use a very friendly language.
Okay, friendly language, friendly tone. Okay, good. Thank you. Another one of these personal questions is about how did you find yourself in HR communications? Was it a direct path, or did you sort of dip your toes in the field and decided you like it?
Yeah, it was everything else than a direct path. As you mentioned, I'm with SAP since 18 years. And really started from the scratch as an HR associate in a little part of the company, and then involved my role. Also was in the role of our shared service center. I was an internal consultant in the shared service center, and therefore really learned HR and all the HR processes very in detail. I really worked as an HR consultant, customer facing, customer in the sense of our employees are our customers, and was very long in those customer facing roles, but always with a very technical focus, as you teased. I also was in charge of our automated contract building system. And then at one day, there was a fellowship offered in the newly created HR communications department. Before, 3 years back, believe it or not, we didn't have an official HR communications department. We did HR communications out of our communications team, but they were not focused, or they didn't have that HR background. And so I applied for that fellowship, and I'm still there. So that was my way. A little bumpy way into HR communications, and as we call it today, people communications.
Okay, you were at the right place at the right time with the right skill set, started from scratch, and basically covering the entire HR field so that you could pop into this role like a hand into a glove. Okay.
I hope so. I hope so.
Definitely seems so. Okay, Rocco, what would you say are some of your major business successes?
Yeah, I think we can directly connect that to that story, because as I said, 2.5 years ago, we didn't have a proper HR communications department. We really built everything from the scratch. We started to think about how do we approach our colleagues, which layout, which voice, what can we maybe try out, which technology do we use? And 2.5 years back, really nothing was there, and now we established this department as a full-blown SAP communications department, having more or less the most communications traffic than, or one of the most communications traffic than other departments, because we are communicating everything what is employee related. So our numbers prove we just in the last year, thanks to the Comms Hub, and I think we will continue talking about the Comms Hub, we only sent 6 million emails out. So I think this is a great success that we really started from nowhere, and at the end deployed our own tool with which we can reach our audiences pretty easy.
Okay, audience.
Besides all the other things like what I said, layout and establishing the whole department.
Okay. We'll get to these details a little bit later in our session. Now, if you think of someone who is only starting their career in HR, someone who is aiming for a role in HR communications, what would you advise them? What skills to brush upon?
Yeah, good question. And first of all, you always need to be open for your audience. So here at SAP, we are 150,000 employees. Lots of developers, lots of sales colleagues on the road, lots of different other job descriptions we have. And you have to be open for all those needs. So for instance, for somebody on the road in sales, they need to have short and crisp information. While others may be sitting on their laptop all the day developing, they may be thankful to read more details. The same manager versus a non-managerial role. Manager maybe needs more details than just a simple employee. So you always have to have the consumer's mind in your own mind, and always try to reach them in the right voice of tone. Again, voice of tone is here. A tone of voice is here the key. Also, you should never stop questioning. You can only provide good communications if you understood in detail what the outcome of this communication should be. And therefore, you should question everybody and everything until you really understood it. And only then you can provide the communication towards somebody who maybe didn't have the chance to raise all these questions with the stakeholders in detail. So this is also always a good advice. Ask as much as possible to get a cool result.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Sorry. Keep going.
Thanks. And especially in HR, we have the tendency to speak HR language, HRish. I always call it HRish. And nobody else outside of HR uses maybe the terms which we are using, wage type, or wage type is such a typical term. Everybody says you have to add this and that wage type, and then I say nobody understands what a wage type is if you do not every time analyze your payslip. So therefore, you have again to have your mind open for colleagues who are not in this specialized language. So provide simple language, but with the detail which is needed to understand what you want to tell within your communication. And another great factor, which is more and more important, and it's a pity that it's only important or getting more and more important these days, is really have an eye on accessibility. Again, think about employees who are not that lucky and can read everything and can hear everything. Maybe you have employees with visual or hearing hurdles, and then the topic of accessibility needs to be reflected in your communication as well. So it needs to be, again, a simple language, easy to understand, pictograms, maybe with an alternative text, all those stuff you need to take into consideration. And again, everything comes together on be open-minded and think about what the customer need is, and then you are very welcome in a communicator's role.
Okay, this is very, very solid advice. I like what you said about listening, about asking questions. That entails listening, knowing who your audience is, your audience as your employees, and also how important it is to segment your audience. So, as you said, salespeople have different needs than someone who is entirely office bound.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm also very glad that you brought up the topic about accessibility. Without adjusting your tone and manner of delivery, we are excluding these people, and this is definitely not what we want in workplaces, as inclusion is a staple of successful organization in 2022 and ever.
And it's that pity that it's still that slow. this development is still that slow.
There is certainly more to improve in this area, but I'm glad that we are at least talking about it, and there are some strides to get it better, to get it fixed. Okay, one little tiny thing. Is there anything that you know now and you wish you had known when you started and as an HR communicator?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, coming from nearly nothing and nearly coming from a green field, we made many mistakes. We had many failures, and thanks to that management at that time, we were allowed to do mistakes. And for instance, I can remember one workshop where we thought, okay, we have to be innovative. We have to do something else. We want to provide emails with background music. And then we invested, I couldn't remember how many hours to create something with background music. And then we sent out this email to a test audience. And the audience said, "Are you crazy? We just want to read your message. We don't need a background music. This disturbs you. This disturbs us in our business day." And yeah, this was a lessons learned. We were very over-engineered in some things, and yeah, this is what you take out of such an, let's say, agency working style. Raiola, now we lost you. Looks that my story was too shocking for her. Maybe somebody else from someone out there?
No, yeah, Matija speaking from CMOS. There seems to have been some sort of technical issue, but Raviola is reconnecting as we speak, so please wait for an additional minute or so, as Zoom seems to have crashed on her.
Yeah, this gives me the chance to drink something. Maybe so far, any question from the audience while we are waiting for Raiola? Okay, then maybe
I'm checking them, so if anyone has questions, please feel free to type them in, and Rocco will start answering. And we actually do have a question. So I work in a local government. May you please explain how you create the HR comms calendar? How often do you send HR comms company-wide, and the types of messages? An example, the structure of the HR comms. Thank you.
So you mean how often we are sending internal HR communication? So it's yeah, we have some regular sendings, like let's say there are salary related communications or bonus plan related communications, and for that we more or less have a yearly calendar, which we can use across the year, and for which we can plan across the year, and then exactly send it out when it is needed. All the other stuff comes ad hoc, and from our department, I would say we are sending out weekly, maybe I can't count it, maybe 5 different messages which are going out company-wide, so to all 150,000, or maybe 5 is too much. So let's say in a month, it's maybe 5 which we are sending out company-wide, but we have many other communications which are just going to a sub-part of the company. And here it really depends on the moment. It really depends on the topic. So you can't really plan that much upfront. Besides, you have topics which you know they are repeating every time, every year.
Thank you, Rocco. Hope that answered the question. Now, we do have an additional question, which we can start answering. And hello, Raviola.
Hi.
I am so sorry about this. This was my worst fear, and it happened.
But we survived so far, Raviola. All good.
Okay. What did I miss?
Okay, so while you were off, we started answering questions from the audience. So now you can actually take over and read the question from Paloma so that Rocco could answer that one and then continue with your interview.
Okay. I see no open questions here. I'm sorry. Everything seems to have been erased while I was gone.
Okay, then I'll read this one as well. Rocco, don't you think that placing internal comms in HR limits its reach? Are you friends with the idea of placing it in corporate communications? Same messages, different tone and language, etc.
Not really, because as I explained, so you can do HR communications coming from corporate communications. We had that before. Before we had a dedicated HR communications department, it was coming from corporate communications, and there was nothing wrong about it. It was all good, but now we have really specialists working for the different L1 areas for the HR departments. We have business partners who are really directly supporting the different management areas within SAP. They always know what is going on. They are much more in detail, as if you just hand over a topic. Let's say we have again the salary related topic, a new bonus plan is provided. Usually what would happen is that the team who's creating the bonus plans would work for that about, let's say, half a year. So they work about half a year, and then at the end of the project, they come to the idea, okay, we have to communicate that, and maybe we need to communicate it next week. And then they would reach out to somebody who is not directly connected to them. And then they have to hand over all the information, have to start a questioning process with this person. And this would work, yeah, but it's much more stressful as if you would have some business partner who's directly always connected to the different departments and who has the HR knowledge, and then who provides always consulting how to communicate, when to communicate, what to communicate. As said, the other version always works too, but I think the connection between the HR business and the HR communication business partners, this is really key, and which helps us a lot here.
Okay, thank you. Good. This brings us to the more technical sphere of questions, which is great as an introduction, because we are going to talk about what is needed for a company to have a successful internal communications.
Yeah. As mentioned, for us, really key is that we target our audience according to their needs, but also we target our audience in general. So we are using much more data-driven communications in the last 2 years than we ever used before. Before we maybe had a distribution list, everybody in Germany, and it was everybody in Germany, with the students, with the colleagues already in early retirement. Everybody got blown with all information, and now we are able to really target our employees based on the employee group, like full-time employee, sales employee, whatever. So make usage of the data. Usually you have your personal data somewhere in the system. Make really usage of it, and in the best case, you can connect your data to your communication system, and in the very best case, you are using SAP Employee Central and the Comms Hub on the other side, and then could directly connect it. This was just a little advertisement up front, but I think everything helps, which really helps to target and to personalize communications. And if you're doing it with Word and a mass mailing, it's better than just a simple email with "Dear colleague, please blah blah blah." If you get an email which says, "Dear Raiola, we have this and that information for you," we see the increase in reading rate. So make use of your data. You have it somewhere for sure. Make use of the technical possibilities which you already have in place, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot. And even us, when we started here at SAP with the HR comms department, we even did not use the mass mailing function, and it's in Word, it's inbuilt in Word. It's not comfortable for us as a creator. It wasn't comfortable, but it helps to increase your reading rate.
Okay, so to sort of sum it up, it would be ideal if your internal communication system is tied to your HRIS system.
Absolutely.
Because everything is then instantly updated, instantly synced. You run much less risk of delivering the right message to the wrong audience, which eventually can lead to poorer engagement rates with your internal communications, and that's something we definitely want to avoid.
And you can target your audience more or less on the fly if you know whom to target, maybe by job code or something like that. If you have the connection between your employees' data and your messaging system, it's usually a topic of seconds to find, or of minutes to find the right audience. Creating a distribution list usually takes hours. If it needs to be done externally by an IT department, maybe days. So that's really the advice.
Okay, good. So saving time on creation of these internal communication messages is definitely important too. Good. Moving on to the next question. How do you start to take stock of what you have, the tech stack currently in use, what is unnecessary, what is needed? How do you determine your organization needs from internal communications?
Yeah, again, here it comes again to the topic. What can you offer as a department, as a company? So when we talk about the technology, you have to maybe think about today everything is mobile friendly or needs to be mobile friendly, because again we have the people somewhere on the road and they need to consume their email on an iPhone or on a Samsung, Android, whatever. And this is much more user friendly and again reader friendly if you are able to scroll through and if the images are on the right position and not horizontal versus vertical where they should be. So there are tools out there which can solve that issue, and from the technical base which you as a creator need. Again, start with what you have, and in the best case, evolve to a cool communications tool.
Okay, good. That answers. Now, next question is about when, according to your experience with what you've learned, is the right time for a company to start working on internal communications?
Always.
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. So especially, I have the feeling, and maybe it's my personal feeling, but I have the feeling, especially since the world gets so much more social with Facebook, with Instagram, whatever, the audience, the employees also await that from their employees. They want to be more connected than before. They want to have more detailed information. In the best case, they follow you on LinkedIn or whatever, or on an internal social media channel. And it can't be too late to start with internal communications. And I'm sure everybody here on this call is doing internal communications, otherwise you won't be there. So just always think about, is it still the right approach? Is maybe a standard email always starting with your colleague, blah, 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 the right approach? Question, is another way better? Remember our idea with the music emails? No, it's not better to send out an email which is underlined with music, but maybe you can set up a new branding for your internal communications, which make your company's employee which makes them feel more like a community. Something like that always helps. And again, it's never too late for internal communications.
More and more companies are now set out to change the way they talk to their employees and to their audience. And definitely this pandemic simply made it all faster. There is some statistics from the Gallagher's State of the Sector 2022 industry report that only 5% of surveyed companies will keep their internal communications the same way as it was. So everybody's changing the way.
There is a change, exactly. Yeah, and you can see also the change in the tone. Here in Germany, we have dedicated greeting if you are a friend to somebody, or if you are if you know yourself. Yeah, so I would say see if I just know somebody, and if you would be my friend, I would say do. And more and more companies are now changing into this friendly language and approaching their employees with do. And it's just a simple example, but it helps again to build this connection.
Okay. Good. Thank you. And now we get to the question I'm sure many are burning to know. What is the effect of a good internal communications on the workforce and the organization? How do you know that your efforts are working?
Yeah. There again, how do we know? How do we know that our efforts are working? Again, I have to reference to the concept, the tool which we are using, coming from Samos. Here we have statistics, and I already said we sent out around 6 million HR emails last year. We sent out, so we are opened up that tool for other communication departments as well. In total, we send out 12 million emails, and we are also able to report on the reading rate. And we see how our communications are perceived. We see the difference between a communication which starts with your colleague and with a communication which is personally approaching you. And this is really a great step forward, that you're just not blasting out communications via Outlook where you don't see if anybody reads it or opens it or whatever. We can also analyze how links are clicked and so on and so forth. And we are really getting feedback on the communications. Before we got feedback on the topics, but we also are now getting feedback on the communications from our employees who say, okay, that's great communication. It was lovely reading. And as I said before, it was only, cool news. You send something out, we are getting more salary, or we get whatever new canteen. And now it's, hey, cool, we are getting new canteen. And the message was great, how you provided it to us.
Okay, so that brings us to the conclusion that the technology you're using now allows you to have a crystal clear perspective on how successful your messaging is, who reads it, what sections are read, are they skimmed, are they read,
exactly.
What type of messaging gets the most engagement, and that helps you draft your following.
Exactly. It's always an ongoing process. It's always still a learning process for us.
And it helps you to improve in the future.
Yeah.
Excellent. What would be the basic tech stack needed to succeed in the role?
You mean as a communicator?
Yes.
Yeah. The personal. So be curious for technologies. Be brave to try out new technologies. Sure. You should be able to write an email in Word or in Outlook. So you should be able to prepare an email. But it's not that complicated anymore when you're using a proper communication tool. Thinking back in the past, we saw other tools on the market where you really had a kind of, let's say, really HTML developer knowledge. You had to know what you're doing or had to do something in the back end. Today, this is more or less not needed anymore. And therefore, as I said, be brave and try something like that out. And on the other hand side, be open for technical trends like new interesting apps or whatever. So there needs to be the combination of, I want to provide communication and I need to be interested in the technology behind, because without knowing the technology, you can't create a proper communication towards your employee. And at least you should know it basically. So we are here also at SAP. We're divided in this business partner team who is really into the writing and into consulting the departments. And there's another part of the team where I am. We are doing this consulting of the technology, and then we are working hand in hand how we can provide the best result for our audiences.
Okay, I like that, what you said. Be open to technology, but also there are certain tools that you don't need to be exactly tech savvy to deliver and create a wonderful message that's easy to read and that looks wonderful. Okay, this brings us to the next question. We know that before you made a clean sweep of the tech stack SAP used for internal communications, you used 9 different tools.
Yeah.
How was the experience replacing these 9 tools with one? You were there from the start.
Yeah, it was, let's say it for us as a project team, we really came from, we came from the request, or let's say the history of the story behind this. We had a communication for our board, and everything went wrong what potentially could go wrong. It was the wrong audience, it was ugly design, we didn't have a personalization, although we were requested to do so. And then we got really from the board the message, okay, we don't want to have that anymore. Search something, do something, build something up. And there we came together, so us as SAP with you as our partner Semos, and then we designed really from the scratch this communication tool, which you are calling Nurture and we are calling HR Comms Hub. And for us, it was always an evolving process. So we first start with an editor. We need a proper editor, which everybody without HTML knowledge can create a communication, in which everybody can create a communication. We need an approval workflow. So on the communication, we want to have an approval workflow. We need to have a targeting for the audience based on our employee central data. So the key point, which I mentioned before, we want to leverage our data and not distribution lists anymore. We need to have a mobile experience for that. And we want to have an analyze behind what is how the communication was perceived. And for us, it was a step-by-step approach, and we got closer and closer and closer to the end result. And then it was not that big thing to switch between the old Outlook and Word world to the new Comms Hub. But then we started to presenting it to others. And I'm still doing this presentation every week, maybe twice a week. And there's always this wow effect. If you go to a communicator who did not work before with such a technology, and then you show him, okay, you can target your employees, you have the mobile version, you have direct preview, you do not need to send everything back and forth to yourself to check how it looks. This takes ages usually. Yeah. There's usually a second of silence in the call, and then I know, okay, the second of silence, the next moment they are answering with, wow, that's great. And this is usually how they perceive. And this is always still a great feeling to see that you can help others with such a tool.
Okay, thank you. So it is possible to make a transition from 9 up to 9, even more, I suppose, disconnected tools into something that sums it all up and makes it all easier. One tool to rule them. Okay, great. We're slowly approaching the limit. So I'd say let's switch to the next section of our Q&A, which is talking about trends, talking about the future. What would you say is an ongoing trend regarding internal communications? Is internal communications getting more attention today? And are people more familiar with the role itself?
Yeah, as mentioned, so it's getting more attention than before. That's the awaiting from your employees. They want to be approached. They want to feel cared. So internal communications is something which is, at least here for us, growing more and more and more. And when we're talking about trends, there are clear trends also company internal or corporate wise, moving away from emails to Teams, or they are departments which are not using email anymore. We in our department, to communicate within the department, we usually use Teams. We do not send emails around anymore because it's much faster, it's much easier. And therefore, maybe a trend would be to provide the employees their communication of choice. So maybe I'm a Teams guy, and then I say, okay, I want to have all my communications coming from my employer in MS Teams, while others say, I don't want Teams. It's too overwhelming for me. There's too much ping on my mobile. I want to have it as an Outlook message. So this could be a clear trend in future, that the employee decides on their own how they perceive their communication.
Wow.
Another thing is Another thing is maybe artificial intelligence, that I go into an office and get a welcome message on my mobile by an app which says, "Hey, welcome to Semos in Skopje. Today we are offering vegetables for lunch." Something like that. And your meeting takes place in room 605 and have to see the latest news from our CEO. Something like that will come in future for sure.
Okay,
or it's already out there in small parts.
It's definitely artificial intelligence is already out there, not in the extent such as you've just mentioned, but we're definitely getting there, and we're getting there fast. What I've noticed you say is this, when you said moving away from email to Teams, what I hear is meeting employees in their flow of work, and not creating any hindrances to the communication, rather removing them.
Absolutely.
Saving time and just let people do their job in the easiest way possible. Okay, good. Now one question regarding remote and hybrid work models. Lots of companies have shifted towards these working models. How have recent remote and hybrid work happenings affected internal communications?
Especially when we think of the pandemic and the start of the pandemic, there was this tendency to over communicate. And to really, which was good. Absolutely, it was absolutely good. Everybody wanted to take care about everything. I remember we once sent out a communication how to wash hands. It was already provided maybe twice or 10 times to the employees in different ways, but we also provided communication on how to wash hands. So there was a certain time of really over communicating, maybe caused by this unknown, uncertain situation which came across all of us. And then, thanks God, this communication hierarchy ended pretty soon, and then all communications were focused again on the topics which were necessary for the employees. But on the other hand side, we had to start dealing with the fact that now not all our workforce is in the offices anymore. And for us, it was pretty normal. We always had, from time to time, people in home offices. And we didn't take that much care about it when we created communications. But with seeing really the whole workforce is in home office, we had to think about how we, for instance, add attachments to the communications. Because if you have a bad network quality and we are adding an attachment of 10 megabyte, it takes ages for you to open. Or is it really necessary to start every communication with a GIF banner, where it then takes ages to load if you have a bad network quality? So there was a slight shift of mind for us, which was good because we reduced also the load on our network. But thanks God, this was really the only thing which we had to take into consideration, besides the fact that there was this clear over-communication phase at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's understandable. No one had anticipated something like that. Okay, exactly. Thank you. I will conclude with my questions. We are definitely almost out of time, so let's switch to audience questions. We have a couple. This one is very quick, so I'll pick it because then we can move on to the next one. Sorry if I missed it, says anonymous attendee, but what tools are you using to communicate and track the responses?
As said, the HR Comms Hub. And I thought maybe we would have some screenshots or something like that in here. HR Comms Hub is a tool which we created together with Semos. Semos as our partner, and you call it again Semos Nurture. And as said, this is our suite which we are using really from editing the communication, start an approval workflow, target the audience, send it out, and at the end, after we send it out, we are able to analyze how it was perceived by the target audience. So we can also say we send it out globally, but now we want to see how was it read only in Germany. So this is the tool which we are using, and which is after regular Outlook emails, which you are sending one-to-one here at SAP, at already the second most communication tool which we are using at SAP.
Okay, good. Thank you. That was a very crisp answer. One last question. Is tool flexibility a requirement for the tool? How has this helped you?
It's absolutely a requirement, or it's not a requirement, but it helps us a lot, to be honest. So we have a very cool and very flexible support team and project team from Semos. And yeah, I feel that we learned a lot from each other, and that we were able to really provide the feedback coming from a comms department, which was then always built in a very flexible and very fast way into the tool. And this was always very helpful, because our requirements, they might differ from the requirements from a blue collar company. But Semos and the tool as such are that flexible that more or less every wish can be somehow built in those different phases which I just described, from editing until sending and so on and so forth. There are limits, as everywhere and in every tool, for sure, but yeah, so far the number of limits was very low.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for this answer, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. It was really a pleasure to have you in this little chit chat of ours.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm afraid our time is up. We've reached the limit of our today's time slot. Should you need any individual advice on internal communications for enterprises, we'll be happy to show you how. Reach out to us on contact@simoscloud.com, and hope to see you all soon. Thank you immensely, Rocco.
More than welcome. It was a pleasure.
I'm glad. And goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye for now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.